The New Norm is brought to you by Winning at Home. I'm Steve Norman. Welcome to The New Norm. So we just recently did an episode on forgiveness, and I just came across another passage that speaks to the same theme. So maybe God is trying to drive home a point for me. I'm going to read you 1 Samuel 24 in its entirety, and then give you kind of four thoughts to wrestle with as we come out of this. After Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, he was told, David is in the desert of En-Gedi. David has been anointed king, but he can't be king while Saul is still king, so his only options are to wait or to assassinate Saul, which is something he's not prepared to do, as we'll learn in this passage. So Saul took 3,000 able young men from all Israel and set out to look for David and his men near the crags of the wild goats. Earlier in the story, we learned that David has about 600 men with him, so not super good at math, but the basic conclusion here is that David and his forces are outnumbered 5-1. Saul came to the sheep pens along the way, and a cave was there, and Saul went in to relieve himself. David and his men were far back in the cave. The men said, "This is the day the Lord spoke of when he said to you, I will give your enemy into your hands for you to deal with as you wish." Then David crept up unnoticed and cut off a corner of Saul's robe. Afterward, David was conscience-stricken for having cut off a corner of his robe. He said to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, or lay my hand on him, for he is the anointed of the Lord." And with these words, David sharply rebuked his men and did not allow them to attack Saul. And Saul left the cave and went on his way. Then David went out of the cave and called out to Saul, "My lord, the king!" When Saul looked behind him, David bowed down and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. He said to Saul, "Why do you listen when men say David is bent on harming you? This day you have seen with your own eyes how the Lord delivered you into my hands in the cave. Some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not lay a hand on my Lord, because he is the Lord's anointed. See, my father, look at this piece of your robe I hold in my hand. I cut off the corner of your robe, but did not kill you. See, there's nothing in my hand to indicate that I am guilty of wrongdoing or rebellion. I've not wronged you, but you are hunting me down to take my life. May the Lord judge between you and me, and may the Lord avenge the wrongs you have done to me, but my hand will not touch you. As the old saying goes, from evildoers come evil deeds. So my hand will not touch you. Against whom has the king of Israel come out? Who are you pursuing? A dead dog? A flea? May the Lord be our judge and decide between us. May he consider my cause and uphold it. May he vindicate me by delivering me from your hand." And when David finished saying this, Saul asked, "Is that your voice, David, my son?" And he wept aloud. "You are more righteous than I," he said. "You have treated me well, but I have treated you badly. You have just now told me about the good you did to me. The Lord delivered me into your hands, but you did not kill me. When a man finds his enemy, does he let him go away unharmed? May the Lord reward you well today for the way that you treated me. I know that you will surely be king and that the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hands. Now swear to me by the Lord that you will not kill off my descendants or wipe out my name from my father's family." So David gave his oath to Saul. Then Saul returned home, but David and his men went up to the stronghold. There's kind of four thoughts that I see in this passage. And the first one is this. David resists the temptation to vengeance. Like you have to have known that thought crossed his mind as David crept up behind Saul with his blade out. And he's almost doing the math. All of his friends are saying, like, you have every right to kill this person as an act of preemptive self-defense. And when you read the story in its entirety, Saul has tried to kill David on multiple occasions. He's thrown a spear at him twice. He followed him to a different city and massacred everybody who gave David aid who was there. He's been hunting David for years throughout the Judean wilderness. He has every intent to murder him. And David has to struggle with his desire to say, all I would need to do is pull this blade around his throat in one swift movement, and all of my troubles will be over. Not only am I not on the run anymore, not only do I get to go home, but I get an upgrade. I get to live in a palace, and I get to be ruler of the entire land. Everything would be so easy if I just did this. But I think there's another part of David that knows what Jesus is going to say later is that those who live by the sword die by the sword. And I wonder if David had done a different set of math that said, I could kill him to become king, but if I do that, what precedent am I setting for my own reign? Whoever feels offended or slighted or hurt by who I am or of a decision that I've made could take up the very same approach and just turn around and murder me. Dr. Martin Luther King said, if we were to follow the eye for an eye ethic all the way to the very end, we would leave the whole world blind. And David is saying, if I murder Saul, I'm just setting up a cycle for violence that's going to spin around and around and around. And there have been times in my life, and maybe there have been moments in yours where I said, you know what? I could really hurt somebody who has hurt me, and maybe even hurt them more. And there's a part of those revenge fantasies that feel good in the moment, but if we play them all the way out, we have to ask a really important question is, and what does that get me really? Like, does it might give you a rush of adrenaline, or it might give you a moment of vindication. But even if you got what you think you want, I think in time it would reveal that it's not really what was good for you. So David resists the temptation to vengeance. And I think he encourages us to resist the temptation of vengeance as well. And then secondly, I love that David recognizes that wrong was done. He says this, he goes, I have not wronged you, but you are hunting me down to take my life. He goes, you are causing harm to me. You're causing harm to my family. You're causing harm to my men. You've killed innocent people along the way. I'm just going to state out loud in front of everybody who's listening. And we think there's an audience of close to 4,000 people. There's 3,000 of Saul's men and 600 of David's men who are all listening in on this conversation. And if it's being held at the mouth of a cave in a mountainous region, my guess is that the echoes are carrying this conversation to everybody who is listening. So this is a very public confrontation. And David is naming the offenses that Saul has committed against him and others in front of a gathered crowd. And I think this is really important for us in our forgiveness journeys, because I think some of us, especially if we were raised in environments where we were just taught to be kind of polite, it can turn into us being doormats where we don't advocate for ourselves or we don't name harm that was truly done. So what I appreciate about David is not only does he resist the temptation towards vengeance, but he doesn't sugarcoat or whitewash any of the real harms that Saul has committed. He recognizes that harm was done. And then he releases Saul from his resentment. He goes, you know what? I'm going to punt all of this rage, and I'm going to put it in God's lap. I'm going to let the Lord judge between you and me. He says it a couple times. May the Lord be our judge and decide between us. May he consider my cause and uphold it. May he vindicate me by delivering me from your hand. And David says, whatever God can do for me is going to be way greater than what I could do for myself. And this is another lesson that I have stumbled on over the course of the years, that God's justice is always better than my revenge. His vindication is always better than my vengeance, if only I have the faith to trust him and the patience to wait for it. But then there's one other moment, one other line in here that I hadn't caught until recently. So they have this standoff. David publicly forgives Saul. Saul weeps. Saul recognizes his wrongdoing. Saul asks David not to kill his family when he ascends to the throne. David gives his oath to Saul, and we think that that's where the story ends, but it doesn't. It says, then Saul returned home. Where? To the palace. And David and his men went up to the stronghold, which is what? Another cave. When the whole thing is done, after David resists the temptation to revenge, after he recognizes wrong that was done, after he releases Saul from resentment, the last thing that David does is he retreats to safety. David is not naive. Despite Saul's assurances, David knows enough about Saul to know that even though Saul is forgiven, and even though Saul has been publicly apologetic, he's not really convinced at his core that Saul has changed. And David is too smart to put himself back in Saul's orbit. So he retreats to safety. And one of the lessons I pull out of this text is that forgiveness is not the same as trust. You can forgive somebody and still not trust them with your safety or your well-being or your love. And sometimes a wise and appropriate and mature thing to do is to forgive somebody, but then to hold that relationship at a distance. To create a buffer zone between you and that person to prevent yourself from being harmed by them again. Doesn't mean that we don't bless them. It doesn't mean that we don't pray good for them. It just means that we stand just beyond the reach of their arm so we can't get punched in the face again. And that's a great gift from this passage, that David lets Saul go back to his corner and David returns to his corner and trusts God with his safety and his future going forward. So if you're somebody who is struggling with forgiveness, as we all sometimes do, consider the lessons that we pull out of 1 Samuel 24. To resist the temptation to vengeance, to recognize that wrong was done, to release the offender from our resentment, and finally to retreat from safety. Hopefully one of those is something that you can wrestle with over the course of this next week. If you're liking the show and it's resonating with you, it would do us a great favor if you would leave a rating and then also a review. It helps other people connect with the content that is getting released here weekly. Also, The New Norm is produced and distributed by Winning at Home. Winning at Home is a faith-based nonprofit committed to making individuals, couples, families, and businesses stronger through counseling and coaching. For more information, visit winningathome.com. I'm your host, Steve Norman. Thanks for listening.